Gosh, dang it. Can we erase marker?
Oh my gosh, this was like the thing that I needed. It was really interesting. Okay, and it's really hard to dethrone a category king after they're in their spot. And so the question is like, well, how do we become a category king? How do we do that?
One of the biggest mistakes that new entrepreneurs make happens to be the thing that the biggest companies in the world have mastered, yet they never talk about. And this book is the first book I've ever found that actually explains it in a really cool way. This book is called Play Bigger, and you may or may not have heard of this book. It's one of the more rare books out there, yet this is the one that gives you the key to how to be successful. It all has to do with figuring out how to dominate your market. Now, a lot of people think dominating the market is all about figuring out like what's the market you're gonna go into, right? And that's actually the exact opposite of what you should be thinking about. In fact, I wanna walk you guys through a really quick process. This is something I talk about in my book, Expert Secrets. I talk about figuring out what market you're gonna be in, okay? And what we're gonna be figuring out today is how can you become a category king? So when you think about markets, there are three core markets almost every business falls into, okay? These are the three markets. This is health, wealth, and relationships. If you go back in time like 100 years ago, back when business was first getting started, every business kind of fell into one of these three things, right? And there weren't a lot of entrepreneurs doing businesses, right? You had to have a lot of money, startup capital, and so, but almost every business fell into one of these three things. And then over time, everyone was in the health market, the wealth market, the relationship market. These markets were growing, they were thriving, and this is when entrepreneurship here in America started sprouting, started growing. And from there, people started saying, well, how can I be successful? I want to start a business. So what happens is they go to like the market, right? So health, wealth, relationships. And the first thing you do is start creating what's called submarkets. So this example, let's just pretend like it's the health market and you want to become a health influencer, right? So first you look like, hey, there's these big companies having success in health, but it's kind of big, it's broad. Like the first thing is moving down from the three core markets. So these are three core markets. The next phase is called the submarkets, okay? So inside of health, you might have, for example, maybe you've got weight loss, right? That's part of health, but there's weight loss. But there also could be, some want to get stronger, weight gain. There could be people inside of the health market who are trying to get their skin to look better, right? So you got skincare. Like there's all these different submarkets, and there's literally thousands of submarkets now. So you come back here, we have the three core markets, health, wealth, relationships, then you have the submarkets in every single thing. Now you notice initially I painted these all in blue, right? Because these are blue oceans. Now blue ocean's nice because when you first get into it, you're the only person and you're able to throw your fishing pole in and start pulling out fish like crazy. What happens is when a bunch of people in the same market, that market starts getting red and gets redder and gets redder, okay? And the ocean gets bloody because there's 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 people all trying to be successful in the health market. And so the only way to be successful then is to shift to the submarkets. This is where you figure out your own blue ocean, right? So the very first person inside the health market who broke out and said, I'm just gonna focus on weight loss. All of a sudden they're in this blue ocean and all of a sudden they get all the money. They're throwing their fishing poles out and all the fish are coming in really, really simple, really easy. And someone else is in the next one, right? These all become blue oceans. Now this was business, 30, 40 years ago. The reality is what's been happening now is that every one of these submarkets have all become red oceans, right? How many people you guys know in the weight loss niche? How many oceans do you guys know people in the weight gain, in skincare? Like all these oceans have become red and bloody. And so for you guys right now, the next phase people do is say, okay, what's the next thing? Like what's the next direction? And it's coming back here, say, okay, now that weight loss is, it's a red bloody ocean, I want to move to the third level, and the third level is the niches, right? So that's the third level. So inside of weight loss, it's like, well, what do we have in here? There's the keto diet, right? And then there's a brand new blue ocean, and then there's the paleo diet, and then like all of the different diets start popping up as well, right? Now this is the world we live in today, okay? There's the three core markets, tons of submarkets, and now we're in the niches. But the problem with the niches is the niches have also become bloody, right? And so this is where most of you guys who are beginners are getting into business say, okay, I'm gonna start a business, I'm gonna be in the keto market. The problem though is the keto market is a red bloody market. There are millions of people literally competing inside this market. So how do you stand out? How do you be different? How do you become successful? And that's what Play Bigger is all about. Playing Bigger, if you read the title here, it says how pirates, dreamers, and innovators create and dominate their markets. They're not coming in and dominating, they are creating and then dominating, okay? That is the key. To become a category king inside of a market, it's all about going and creating a brand new category. So for a good example for this, when we launched our company ClickFunnels a decade ago, right? Where does it fit into? Okay, three core markets. ClickFunnels is in the wealth market, right? Helping you make more money, okay? You come down here, the sub-market is probably gonna be websites, and then from there, it's gonna be sales funnels. Now, we were the very first people to come in here, right? When we carved out this market, we didn't come into like, okay, there's email automation, there's email autoresponders, there are all these different bloody oceans. I didn't come in and say, okay, hey, we have this thing called ClickFunnels, it'll do this email automation, because there was already a bloody market. We came in, and we were the very first people to say, and to put on this crown, right? And say, okay, we are sales funnels. the person who is the category king, it's very difficult to dethrone them in the future. So for you, when you're figuring out like what market you want to be into, what you want to do is you want to create your own category. After you create your own category, you instantly by default become the category king, and now you have time to go and become the biggest person in the industry before all the wannabes and the knockoffs start jumping in, okay? And so that's what this book, Play Bigger, is all about. It's one of my favorite books. I think the title should have been How to Become a Category King, but it's called Play Bigger, and I highly recommend reading it. But if you like, I have a group, one of my higher and mastermind groups, it's called the Category Kings, and we had Dave Peterson, who's one of the authors, actually come and speak to us. He spent 4 hours talking to us, going deep into how to become a category, how to do category design, how to become that person. And what's crazy to me is he said after the entire 10, 15 years he's been focusing and teaching this, he said of all the things in this book, there's one thing that was the very most important. And I don't want to spoil what that is for right now. This was taken from a presentation inside my inner circle. Every single person who's in the room spends $50,000 a year to be in there. And normally we do not let these presentations outside of the walls of that room. But I want to take this clip because it'll help you understand how to figure out what the problem is you can design a category around. It is the secret. And the craziest thing is that Dave told us that he learned this process after he wrote the book. So this part's not even in the book, yet it's the most important thing to understand and to master if you want to create your own category. So that said, let's jump into my inner circle room and watch this presentation about how to become a category king.
Oh my gosh, this was like the thing that I needed. It was really interesting. For me, the world that the lens that I look at the world through is always offers, right? Like I always lead like, what's the offer we're gonna create? What's the offer we're gonna create? How many of you guys lead with an offer, right? I think that for most of us, that's the lens that I was taught through from like Dan Kennedy. For everyone's like, what's the offer you're gonna create? And then we try to make the best offer and we go from there. With Category Kings, with what Dave Peterson thought was interesting, he stepped one step back. And the first question he asked us all was like, what is the problem do you solve? Now, instinctively for all of us entrepreneurs, like, oh, easy, got it. Right? You're like, I don't solve a problem. I solve thousands of problems. I solve this and this and this and this and this. And that was my first instinct. I'm like, can we skip to the good stuff? And he ended up spending 2 hours on this question. And by the time it was done, there wasn't a single person in the room who was actually able to answer their problem. It was really fascinating, including me. I was like, what is the problem I solve? And the problem I solve is different now than it used to be. So this is what we spent 2 of the 4 hours with them is just trying to answer this question, which was really, really fascinating. And so let me step back a little bit. So how many of you guys have read the book Play Bigger? Okay, if not, it's an amazing book. It's all about how do you become a category king, right? He talks about most businesses, most industries, when they start, there's a category king that owns a category, right? You think about Apple, like they own the smartphone category, right? And the category king typically sucks up like 80 to 90% of the business, and all the competitors come in and they fight over the last 10 to 15, 20% of the business and over the scraps. Okay, and it's really hard to dethrone a category king after they're in their spot. And so the question is like, well, how do we become a category king? How do we do that? And I pulled a couple slides from his presentation because I think they're really useful. He was talking about how if you think about categories, the easiest way to think about it is when you go to a grocery store, right? You don't walk in a grocery store and wander around hoping to find stuff. You're like, okay, I need canned soups. So you walk to the canned soup section, that's the category, and you see all of the different competitors, all the different options, and you pick your thing, right? Or if you're like, oh, I need pillows, you go to that section of the store, and there's all the pillows, and you get it from so the category's there, and there's all the people inside the category are kind of in the thing, right? And so it was interesting because like people don't think about the product first. They're not like, okay, I need to get green beans from, I haven't bought green beans. I don't know what's the giant, the Jolly Green Giant. You don't think about the product first. You think about the category first. Like, oh, this is the thing I need. You go there and you start figuring it out. Now, if you've read any of my books, it's interesting because I look at it through a similar lens, right? I think about, you guys probably see me draw this doodle a million times, but like all of our customers looking for a result, right? All they know is that they want this thing. They want to make money, lose weight, whatever the thing is, right? This is the category, the result, the thing that they're looking for. Like that's what they want. And then there's a whole bunch of options, right? There's like, well, you can do it through the Atkins diet or the paleo diet or there's all these different vehicles that can get you there, right? And so the result, the problem that has happened, this is the category, and then these are all the different things inside the category, right? And so it was taking kind of what he was saying. I was like, how does this fit into the lens that we look at the world through, right? And so I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but that was kind of the first thing he talked about with categories. And then as they went through category design, the very first thing he says, we start with the problem. And he started looking at the big companies that we know, and he's like, they can all articulate their big problem, the problem that they solve for the marketplace in 10 words or less. And notice it's one problem, not a whole bunch of problems. Because I guarantee if I said, on a pad of paper, write down all the problems you guys have, how many of you guys could write down 3,500 problems you solve in your business, right? That's not the question. The question is like for the market, for people, like what is the problem you solve as a whole? And these are some examples he shared, right? Taxis stink. Who like that's the problem. Who solved that one? Uber, right? The end of software, how many of you guys know who solved that one? Salesforce. You go through, my favorite one of this list was, I want to surf in cold water longer. That was the problem this person was supposed to solve, and they invented the wetsuit. Okay? But they're all simple things. And I said that all of the problems, you have to try to identify it in 10 words or less, ideally. If you go 11 or 12, that's probably fine, but it's got to be a short thing where you can say that really, really quickly and really easily. Now, what's interesting is that he was telling us in the meeting that what one of his close friends, he would hang out with his friend like once a week, and his friend owned a big company, and he asked his friend, he said, hey, real quick, what's the big problem that your company solves? And the friend told him, he's like, oh, cool. And then he secretly wrote it down. And next week went to hang out with him again. He said, hey, remind me again real quick, like, what's the big problem your guys' company solves? And the guy's like, told him again, kind of annoyed. And they did it again, the third week, the fourth week. After 5 or 6 weeks, his buddy's like, dude, quit asking me that question. I've told you every single week for the last 5 or 6 weeks. And then he said, check this out. He pulled out his notepad. He said, every single time I've asked you, you've answered a different way. He's like, what's the problem you solved? And the guy looked at him and said, and they all were kind of counteracting, right? The next thing he said, that when they do category design for companies, he said the first thing they do is they go to the executive team, they ask everyone in the executive team, like what's the biggest problem you solve? And he said every time, not like most of the time or once in a while, like every time, every single person at the executive table had a different problem they thought they were actually solving as a company. It was fascinating. And so we had a couple people who were like in the Category Kings group email their teams like, hey, what's the problem we solve? And all people had different problems coming back. And it was fascinating. Like most of us can't articulate what is the problem we solve. In fact, it's interesting because as I was sitting there with ClickFunnels, like I know what the problem I solved 7 years ago was. The problem I solved 7 years ago was basically entrepreneurs don't have technical abilities. So it's like we freed entrepreneurs so they could build things on their own. Like that was this problem we were solving. Okay, that was 7 years ago. Today, fast forward to 2021, is that the problem entrepreneurs have? No, I'm not a moron. I understand there's like a million different places that have drag and drop builders now that you can build websites. Like that's not the problem I'm solving today. If I'm still trying to solve the problem that entrepreneurs are free and now you can go and build your own funnels and websites, like the market has shifted, the category has shifted, and I'm gonna lose, right? He talked about the category kings who don't maintain their status is because they're solving the wrong problem. So with ClickFunnels 2.0, this is the question I'm asking myself. This is why I sat there for 3 or 4 hours on Monday trying to figure out like, what's the problem I solved today? It's different, right? And I was emailing my team and everyone's giving different ideas back and it was interesting. So for you guys, I want you to think about like, what is the problem you actually solved today? This is another one that was interesting. It says, just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm thirsty. Can anyone guess what? That's the problem. Can anyone guess the category king of this one? Boom, 5-hour energy. I don't want to drink a big energy drink. I'm not thirsty, I'm tired. And that became, boom, the category and blew up. Okay? Interesting. So he said problems move people, features do not. The thing he said was interesting because we thought the meeting with him for the 4 hours was going to be us like designing our category. And he told us, he's like, everything I learned about category design I learned after the book came out. And he said what was interesting is he said that he used to focus on like category design up front. He's like, now with companies, we focus on figuring out what is the problem they solve and then the category appears. Is that interesting? We didn't talk about category design once in the 4 hours. It was figuring out what's the problem we solve.
All right, Zach got the wheels in your head spinning, thinking like, what is the category? What is the problem? What's the thing that you can actually solve better than anybody else on the planet? Like for me, after I heard all that, my wheels in my head were spinning like, what is the thing that I can do? What's the problem that I can solve better than anybody else? And hopefully by understanding that, it's gonna change everything for you guys. Again, the key is not going out and figuring out what market am I gonna jump to, what market I'm gonna dominate. The key is crafting and creating your own category, and you do that by understanding the problem at a level that nobody else can at all, which is really cool. Now, a couple years ago, I actually did a really cool video on how to create a red hot market. I'd love for you to watch that video next. The link is right here. Check it out, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video on how to become a category king.